Hello and welcome back to my video series on creating and setting up my metadata-driven processing framework for Azure Data Factory from scratch in your tenant. This is part 9 of the video, and quite simply we're now going to put all of our efforts into practice and actually run the processing framework. So following the deployment steps, we've done all of the hard work, and just to recap, we've created the Azure resources, we've set up permissions and granted access to things via our Key Vault. We've published our database, we've published our Azure Functions app with the functions in there. We've created a single service principal in this instance, and we've deployed the Data Factory core pipelines. We then followed up by just deploying some worker pipelines as well, so the framework has something to do. And we refreshed our data factory and we tweaked the link service connections to represent now our environment and talk to our Key Vault secrets. And then we did the work in the metadata database just to add our current subscription ID, the tenant, the data factory that we want to work with, and we added the service principal details for the framework to use at runtime to call and execute those worker pipelines. So lots of hard work done. Let's put it to the test, basically. So in my data factory, as you've seen, we have our workers and we have our core processing pipelines. And we do actually have a trigger on here already, but it's disabled, and that trigger actually hits the grandparent. I'm not going to use the grandparent in this case. You may have seen from my blogs, the grandparent is an optional pipeline if you want to bootstrap this and do some other things. So I'm not going to call the grandparent. I'm actually just going to cheat really and just skip to the parent, and I'm just going to trigger the parent now. So not rehearsed, let's see what happens. So running, good, it's a good start. So let's just jump over to my monitoring. You'll see there's nothing in here. This is the very first time I'm doing this, following the steps we've taken in this video series. And what I can do is, in conjunction to keep an eye on the Data Factory monitoring portal, I'm also going to go into the database and have a look at the current execution table. So you can see that the execution wrapper has got the metadata for all of my worker pipelines. It's being called by the same factory where those workers exist. So let's just hit refresh on here. Good, we've got an error already. Always nice to see when we're doing it for the first time, unscripted. So that error is actually, we'll go and have a look at where that error is being called in a moment and see what's happened. We do have a success. Let's just go back here and do a refresh. So the error was thrown by wait 2, but actually wait 2 isn't there. Interesting. We do have a wait 2 worker pipeline, don't we? Yes, we do. Maybe this is a good opportunity to demonstrate the restartability of the framework actually. So the error that's generated, it's an execute pipeline error. So we have a situation here whereby the activity of the framework has failed rather than the worker pipeline that's being called failed. So, more of an operational failure versus an actual error in our worker pipeline. So it's interesting, I'm doing this for the first time, so it's good to see what's been captured. You'll notice that because of this execute pipeline error, that's happened in stage 1 of the processing. What's happened is that the metadata downstream has now all been blocked. So it's blocked those downstream stages because of the dependency and because of this issue that's occurred. So let's go and investigate basically. So if I refresh on my monitoring, that error has bubbled up to the child and then the parent, inner activity failure, which is fine. So let me just show you firstly where that error has been captured. So the parent pipeline is calling those execution stages sequentially, and then if we go in there, that just passes off to that child, that stage executor. So what's happened is when I've ran this, if we go into the child pipeline, and this is where now we hit the second level for each loop, where it's actually going to run those worker pipelines in parallel. If we edit that, so that failure in the metadata has come from, so what it's saying is that the Azure function activity that we hit when we passed the worker pipeline information, it has actually, the activity itself has failed, which has resulted in that information being written to the database. So the calling activity was the execute pipeline. So that's where the failures come from, which is interesting. So it's not a framework failure; it's a data factory operational failure, if you like. So if we go back to the monitoring portal, then, so I've shown you now where that's captured because I know that because I created it. But if we go into the child pipeline from the monitoring from the actual run, and let's just see what error message we've got for that. So yeah, it's this one here, our execute pipeline, and it was for the pipeline name. Can't actually spot it. There, wait two. It's on 2 lines. So that's the pipeline name. So we know that's where the issue is. Oh, interesting. So we've got a nice big HTML response issue from the Azure function itself. So bad request. So this is maybe a bit of an anomaly, or maybe just a victim of the fact that we're using Azure PaaS services here. And this was the first time it's ran this. So I'm going to make a statement that maybe this was just a fact that the Azure function compute within this vanilla tenant, within this free subscription, which we created from scratch. Maybe that function just wasn't quite ready to be bombarded with what I was telling it to do. I'm going to draw that conclusion as well, because what we do see is that our worker pipelines weight 1, 3, and 4 did succeed. So maybe there's just a slight issue there with the actual platform rather than with the framework. So given that situation, given that conclusion, which I accept, we're not rehearsed here, that there could be something else at play. What you may want to do if you want to debug that further, and I know I can't debug this further because I don't actually have application insights set up for my Azure Functions app, so I'm not really going to get any more error details on that. If you want that information, then I do recommend going in and setting up application insights to get into the detail. Interestingly, actually, you can see here that the function was only hit 3 times. So whatever happened between Data Factory and that functions app, it never actually even hit it to report a failure. So there's some communication there between Data Factory and the function, which means that the function app never even received that request, which is a bit of a strange one. Anyway, let's not dwell on that. All I'm going to do is, because my framework is resilient, I can just simply rerun the parent pipeline. And what that will do is it will, if I refresh on this table, it will clear down where that error occurred and basically allow me to start again. So if anything, this Azure error has actually done me a favor because I can now demonstrate some of the functionality to you. So in the monitoring, let's just have a refresh. So because we restarted, it's basically cleaned up those errors and we're kind of kicking off again with that parent, and it's now hitting that child pipeline. So let's just sort of switch back to our table and refresh a few times. So we can see wait 2 is running again. So fingers crossed, we now get success. You'll see over on the right hand side of the table, it captures the actual data factory pipeline run ID. So that's useful when we're debugging and troubleshooting. We also get the runtime pipeline parameters as well. So those are the parameters that came from our pipeline parameters table, captured here as a JSON snippet from the actual run. Good. So wait 2 has now succeeded. This is good news. This proves that it wasn't a framework issue because obviously I did nothing to fix this. It was just a platform quirk or a feature. We like features, don't we? So you'll see now that stage 2 was preparing and is now running. Good stuff. You'll see that the wait, the demo friendly here. We're only expecting it to wait a few seconds. But of course, that wait activity, it will have returned and it will have completed. So then in essence, what we are just now waiting for is the framework infant pipeline to actually know that that worker has finished. And it does that in a until loop that you'll see in the infant pipeline. And for every iteration, it will wait 30 seconds just to check if the worker has finished. So although the pipeline may have already succeeded, we're just waiting for the infant to figure that out. That's what this last check status column is for. So that'll be the last iteration where the infant pipeline checked if the worker had finished or not. So it's just a bit of operational information. So good, stage 2 succeeded. So we've now moved on to stage 3. So these things are running in parallel. Just be mindful that I did, of course, trigger the parent using the trigger option, which means I'm telling it to use the published service. If you happen to use debug mode, then depending on your setup and depending on how generous Microsoft are being with that debug environment in your particular region or subscription, the child pipeline won't go parallel for each loop. It'll give you a little warning at runtime that says you're in debug mode. We're actually only going to allow you to do sequential iterations on your for each loop. So just bear that in mind, which is why I did a trigger so we kind of get that parallel behavior. Let's just have another sort of round of refreshes then. Let's just watch this thing run basically. So stage 3 is looking good, just waiting for that last iteration to finish. Still running, not actually captured an infant check status there, that's interesting. Let's see what we get in the monitoring. So wait 9 is still in progress. Did we have a longer parameter maybe for wait 9, did we? Which is why it's kind of dragging its heels a little bit. 9, it's only 7 seconds. Interesting. Let's have another refresh. So actually wait 9 for whatever reason did take, as you can see, 1 minute 31 seconds for the parameter that was passed at 1:30. Interesting. Why is that? Wait 9. Wait 9 is pipeline ID 10. Pipeline ID 10 doesn't have a pipeline parameter that we override at runtime. Of course, I'd forgotten this. So that means that wait 9 was using whatever value is actually set on the pipeline, which is 90 seconds, of course. I think I did this as part of the functional testing, just to have a parameter but then not override it at runtime. So that's basically why it's dragging its heels. Actually, I could have, of course, made that a little more demo friendly, but again, not rehearsed. It's good to see these things. So yeah, we're kind of progressing now. Let's just refresh on the table. Success, good. So pipeline ID 10 for wait 9. This is where the confusion comes. No parameter passed at runtime, which is why that value is null. And then wait 10 succeeded. So the framework is kind of now just sort of cleaning up, if you like. So if I refresh a few more times, there we go. This table is going to get cleared. Let's see if we're done in here. Yes, we are. So the parent, where is it? The parent has now succeeded. Good stuff. My current execution table is empty. So what then happens in the parent pipeline after the execution stages has finished? It then just calls this procedure to archive off the current execution information to the long-term execution log, which if we go in here, that's what we'll get. So as we're kind of in here, let's just order this by the start date. Can't type, order by. So what you'll see is for the local execution ID, you'll see those stages. You'll see that for wait, and let's just put the pipeline name into our order by clause as well. So you'll see we kicked off, and we were running. We had that issue with that wait 2 pipeline, and then actually it was successful eventually. So you can see in the execution log what actually happened there with that. And because we restarted, it stays within the scope of the same execution ID. Good. So I guess really that kind of concludes this part of the video series. We've actually now ran the framework, and we've for the most part got a successful run, and we've kind of explored that restartability as well, which is good. Bonus. Thank you. Join me again soon where we'll look at some now optional features and go more into the framework, and we'll look at the execution dashboard as well. Thanks everybody.